Hello, and welcome to Do the Franchise with me, Jake.
And me, James.
And we are back today with the continuation of our Alien franchise, which we should have finished off probably before Christmas. We didn't. So we're back. And we've had a bit of a hiatus, which we normally do between seasons. So this has been really poor organisation on our part. But hey, we don't get paid, do we, James? So it doesn't matter.
No, exactly. I think this is reflective of the gap between the Alien films that we've just reviewed and we're about to review.
It was totally deliberate.
Oh yeah. This just gets you into the feel of how long you waited for the last Alien film until now. That's how excited we all were.
Do you know what's really odd? When me and James started recording, I literally forgot the name of the film that I was typing into IMDb. So that just tells you how uninspired we were by our viewing of Prometheus. I've watched it twice, which we usually do, don't we, James, for the episodes, in terms of one's to sort of get a vibe for it, and then the second is to criticise it. I think it's clear to say that we've both got feelings about this film, and it's hard to really tell the story because I think if you're here listening to us, you've probably already seen it, right?
Yeah, I think this is definitely a film where I don't even think a plot synopsis is overly helpful.
No,
how you feel about the film, because, well, that would imply that there's a plot to synopsis.
Agreed.
Which I'm not entirely sure. There's definitely someone had an idea, and some other group of people funded the idea.
Yeah,
and then we all paid them back for the effort that they went to by paying to watch the film.
So what you're describing there, James, is a transaction between a film studio, Ridley Scott, who made the original Alien, and a bunch of people with cameras, a bunch of people called actors, and then a bunch of morons like us that went to the cinema.
So effectively, the movie industry happened, and this is the resulting effect of what occurred, and we're going to talk about it.
Can I just say,
for an indeterminate amount of time?
I know. No, I need to. We're going to rush through it in terms of we're not going to sit and dwell on the plot, which again is limited. But I would say, and this is, like you said before we started, it's a very anticipated movie because it was so big at the time. It was sort of 2011 when I first saw the trailer for this film, and God, that's a long time ago, isn't it? And I remember I was working in London, and it was the noise. It was the Alien 1 trailer. And again, it's hard to describe this unless you know what I'm talking about. But if you go on YouTube, watch the Alien 1 trailer, which is Ridley's film, and also then watch the Prometheus teaser trailer, which is also Ridley's film. And in the Prometheus trailer, it starts out with these ominous tones. It shows a spaceship flying to a planet, and it says something like, big things have small beginnings. Who knows what we'll find out there? What we're looking for is the creation and the beginning of mankind itself. And then the trailer does kind of what the film does, but in a better way, in that the trailer shows there's something wrong with the planet they've landed on. Things aren't what they seem, James. People then start behaving strangely. Then you see someone convulsing. Then you see some alien stuff happening in the background. Then you see an alien stand up, which is one of those engineers. And then you literally hear someone screaming, "Cut it out, cut it out, cut it out." And then you see Naomi Rapace just scream. And when this was in this trailer came out in the cinema, it was fucking unbelievable.
Yeah.
The hype behind this trailer and this movie, we were like, oh my God, they're finally making the Alien film we've wanted since Aliens, the second one.
Yeah, I mean, oh my God, they're finally making an Alien film.
Yeah, a proper scary one.
And we were excited for an Alien film.
Yeah.
Because we like Alien films.
100%.
I mean, even the bad ones have got aliens in them.
Yep. and they will always sell tickets. And this wasn't Alien. This was called Prometheus, which is the name of a Greek god, right? Am I right? It's not a Roman god or a Greek god. And,
he stole fire. He was a Titan, I believe, and he stole fire from the gods.
Yes, and he's
And
essentially
gave it
credited
to humans.
Yeah, he's credited with giving humanity the start in life that they needed to become who we are now, right?
Yeah.
That's heavily drawn upon in this film, and then it's completely forgotten about. And in a lot of ways, that's the story of Prometheus in the movie. Everything is then talked about by characters. Two characters stand somewhere, have a conversation about a thing that's like an existential issue, and then in the next scene, it's completely forgotten about.
I mean, if you watch the film, and obviously we have, do you get the impression that every single scene, they could have been on a stage?
Yeah.
And they could have just shifted the scenery around a bit and then filmed the next scene.
100%.
And then done the same thing again, over and over again. And I get that you could possibly level the same criticism at, say, at Alien.
Yeah.
But that gave you, I don't know, you get a sense of geography with Alien.
Yeah.
And we've probably brought this up before, where geography is really important to these films, because you don't know what the stakes are if you don't know where the place is.
Exactly, 100%. And you need a basic grasp of the concept of where the plot is going to, A, feel like the characters are invested in. You can't invest in a character if you don't understand, A, their motives, or B, what their journey is through the movie. A great example of this in Prometheus is Charlie, who is the boyfriend of Noomi Rapace's character. Was it Elizabeth Shaw? Again, the characters are quite forgettable, especially what I then like to call crew member A, crew member B, crew member C, played by Benedict Wong, and then crew member D, E, F, and G. Because that's the only way I could do this film.
Basically, there's the not Ripley and the rest of the cast.
Yeah. Can I just... And I don't want to ruin your fire there, because what you said is you're leading into this better than I am, but I'm just going to play 2 seconds or so, or 10 seconds of this trailer. Now, can you hear this, James?
It was so wrong.
I'm going to skip this. Yeah. Can you hear this?
Yeah.
This is people running and people screaming.
Which is good. It's what you want to do when
and
there are aliens
it's
about.
like, honestly, it's amazing. So whoever made the trailer should have just directed the film. It probably would have been a better film. It'd have been shorter. And I couldn't help but think to myself, yeah, I remember the hype. There was also one of the first movies of its time where it was releasing vignettes, small videos on YouTube, which were not in the film, but they were leading up to the film. And there's a few of them. One of them's a TED Talk. One of them is a Wayland Yutani advert for building your better future. So the TED Talk is with Peter Wayland, who is the character played by Guy Pearce in heavy makeup. Again, something that doesn't make any fucking sense in the film. But there's loads of things where you're like, oh, they prepped us for the movie and gave us all these backstories. And they gave us backstories to the film in YouTube clips so that fans could follow them like Easter eggs. Very clever. Kind of unheard of at the time. I think other than like maybe the Animatrix and the Matrix did this with the video games, didn't they? Where you could follow the story behind the story with the video game. And this was a big thing in the noughties where we were like trying to immerse people in not just the movie as a movie, but it was more about the experience around the movie.
It was sort of like what we did before people obsessed about franchises.
Yeah, exactly. Creating hype. And I think, like you said, James, this film, it couldn't have had any more promise behind it than any film of A, of its genre, and B, just at the time. There wasn't really many films that got this much hype, where I know everyone that I knew went to see this. They were like, this looks like it's going to be good. Oh, and it's Ridley. And you know Ridley, Gladiator, made Alien. He's the big boy. He directs big films. And you're like, yeah, it just had everything going for it. And you came out at the end, and I think you just feel a bit like,
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think it's that deflated noise you just made. It was sort of heard universally. Yeah, it's just like, oh, that was a thing. I was excited for that thing. It didn't really live up to what I was excited about. But it's a, and then I think what happened, because in preparation for this podcast, I think we've both watched some other people reviewing the film.
Yeah.
Which again we don't normally do, but
No.
I think I did it, and this may be the same for you, but I did it out of a search for balance. I figured, maybe this is just my opinion, and I went out and I found a really positive review. I found someone who was breaking down Prometheus, and the goal of it was that they were going to try and make the film make sense, and because it made sense, it would be better. And I agreed with a lot of their points. The guy's name is Chris Stuckman. He's got a wicked YouTube channel. He reviews lots of films. He's currently in the process of trying to become a filmmaker himself.
Oh.
And he's always made low budget like hobby films, but now he's got a big budget film that he's trying to work on. And he reviews films, and he's always fair, I believe, and balanced. But I watched this Prometheus breakdown, and he was basically going into the lore behind a lot of the things and really trying to flesh out stuff. And I kept thinking, if I'd seen the film you're describing, I would have loved that film.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem they had with the vignettes as well, releasing. Like, if you'd presented me with a film you prepped me for, I would feel completely differently about it. And I think that's I went in search of this balance because I was like, maybe I'm just being too harsh. Maybe I'm just not giving it its due. And I think there's certain elements when I had it explained to me, I was like, oh, okay. I can see why you like that much. That makes sense. But at the same time, I didn't need that for Alien or Aliens.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I came out of that film watching experience with those two movies with a complete sense of why I loved the film.
Yeah, I agree.
And I didn't need anything to back it up. I didn't need anyone to delve into or even potentially create some extra lore to make it work. It just worked.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, in that it's that age-old thing of people going, oh, you just didn't get it. And you go, I don't think there's enough to get. I also think if you're looking into it, into the deeper meanings behind the, like you say, behind the subtext, or behind the fact that there's like a cult following, and you're finding out more, I think what they're doing is they're giving the film more credit than it deserves, and they're giving it more context and plot development than it actually had. And like you said, when you boil it all down to its component parts, the sum of it is very little. Very little happens in the movie, and the stuff that does happen, it doesn't really give me any answers, including, it doesn't motivate me to want to find out more. At the end, I kind of went, oh. And if it is a situation when people, I know what you mean by reading other reviews, people have said some science fiction films can be genius. They don't have to answer all your questions. 2001 doesn't answer all your questions. It leaves you wondering what happened to him at the end. And you go, yeah, it does. But he got transformed by the giant stick in 2001, didn't he? It's the obelisk that keeps appearing. And every time it appears, it advances humanity. And in a way, I did draw parallels between that and Prometheus, because I was like, oh yeah, the black goo, which isn't ever explained in Prometheus, is some sort of biological accelerant. That's fine. What happens at the end isn't a question open answered. Do you know what I mean? It's not an open-ended question. What happens at the end, and again, spoiler alert, is literally the xenomorph from Alien 1 is born at the end of the movie. It comes out of an engineer, and it's sort of a proto-version of what we know as the original xenomorph in Alien 1, and it screams at the camera, and then the film goes off. And I said to you, and I think I still stand firm on this, the last scene in Prometheus, where the alien comes out of the chest of the engineer alien man, I think that was tacked on in post, and I don't think that was ever in the movie. And the reason I say that is because when I read about this movie, and I'd done so much research for this episode, and I had done before I went to see the movie, I was a bit of a nerd like you. I followed the Alien franchise. I loved Alien vs. Predator. I went to see Prometheus. Before I went to see it, they said Prometheus is a film that asks the ultimate question, why are we here? Where do we come from? What is our purpose? And you go, oh... So it's not really about aliens, it's about humanity. And it's about the idea that humanity did not start on Earth by accident. We were made by aliens. And I was like, oh, this is a really big concept film. Like those big concepts that, people have talked about for centuries. Where do we come from? Why are we here? Did our DNA come from chimps? Did it come from God? Did it come from aliens? And it's that whole thing. And... there was very much a point of when Prometheus was being advertised and being launched, this is an alien film in the Alien universe, but it is not connected to Alien. That's what they said. That's what Ridley said. That is what it was, right? Yeah. And everybody went in saying the engineers in Prometheus, the big bad guys in this film, are going to be the people in the chair in Alien 1. And I was like, oh, that's so clever. Because in Alien 1, you see an alien in a chair and his chest is burst open. We talked about it on this podcast. But you never find out what that ship is, who the alien is, what they are, or why he's got loads of eggs in his ship. And literally, that's it, isn't it? That's the only link, really, between Alien and Prometheus. And you go, it's just about these engineers who are manufacturing a goo. The goo gives birth to life, and it's like an accelerant. It accelerates genetic engineering, it accelerates mutation or whatever. Think of it whatever you want to be, but I was like, fine, I don't need that to matter. But the fact that at the end of the movie, when I was going down the stairs in the cinema, they showed me a xenomorph climbing out of the alien at the end. I'm like, oh, fuck it, they've just gone, fuck it, put an alien in it. And that, to me, is lazy. And that shows that they didn't have enough faith in the film as it was, that they had to put the xenomorph in it to make sure it was thumbed in at the end, to make sure people knew this is connected to Alien. And if we want to make any more, we can link it to Alien.
Yeah.
It's mad, isn't it? And I know I've really ranted there, and I'm sorry, but...
No,
it's mad.
Because they're perfect points there you've made, because it is just, and I don't know if you've seen, because obviously with Spielberg doing his own sort of life story in cinema at the moment, a lot of people are interviewing him and asking him about his other films. Yeah. And apparently, the more up-to-date release of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he got extra money from the studio to film some extra scenes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The caveat to it all, because the actual theatrical release was just sort of rushed out. Yeah. And he hadn't had a chance to finish it. So he went back to the studio and said, I'd love just to do these extra beats because it makes my story complete. And the studio Fat Cat said, yeah, sure, have the money, but you have to show us inside the ship. And apparently Steven Spielberg regrets showing us inside the ship because he said it sort of spoils the mystery and the intrigue.
I don't think I've ever seen this version.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so this version apparently only exists because of studio sort of decision-making.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if the studio said, well, Ridley, it's a space film. You've made a space film with aliens in it, and, you're quite famously known for another space film with aliens in, and you're saying they're linked, but maybe the plebs at the front won't get that it's linked.
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
Do you want to put an alien in it? And he said,
it's like, no, we're not going to put the alien. Yeah, we're building to the alien. We're not going to put an alien in it. No, but it's not about the alien. It's about mankind and its existentialism. It's about mankind is created by God. God created man. Man created artificial man. And artificial man is now getting his own back. Put an alien in it. Why?
Yeah. It's like, fine, I'll put an alien in it. It's okay.
I said to Natalie, this film, if you class it as a horror, and I'm doing my inverted comma bunny ears like you, if you class it as a horror, it does the same thing that a lot of horror movies do, and the reason I hate horror movies in general is that they have a really good opening first act of intrigue. They build an intriguing idea that allows the audience through a window into an intriguing idea. Oh, what if this was a thing? Let's go and see it. We go and see it. Then there's a little bit of a twist. What we thought we were looking at wasn't quite what it seems. And in the third act, it goes off the rails. And that's pretty much what I feel Prometheus does. It goes completely off the rails after Charlie gets killed. You know, when Newbie's on the ship and Charlie, played by, is it Logan Marshall? I can't remember his name now. He's her boyfriend character, and he gets gooed.
Yes.
Logan Marshall Green. He gets gooed by David, and he ends up sicking up everywhere, going a bit green, and then he gets killed by Charlize Theron's character. And then you find out that Noomi Rapace's character has got a alien in her stomach, in her womb. And then there's the best scene in the film, which is Shaw on the table being operated on by the medical pod, which I thought was brilliant. That scene is terrifying. It's graphic. It's unlike anything I've ever seen in cinema before. It's truly harrowing. And then when the squid comes out of her womb and starts flailing everywhere, I was like, Jesus Christ, this is horrible. That alone, as a scene, is amazing. Whether you like horror or not, or scary films, there's something really awful about that whole concept, and the way it's shot and the way it's brought to life is amazing. And then after that, the film just doesn't really reach that level again for me. It doesn't reach that high of, oh my God, this is terrifying, get me out, get me out. It did then. And then the last half an hour of the film bored me. I went and made a cup of tea.
Yeah, because I think, like you say, it's the first half sets everything up quite well. Spends a lot of time asking deep and meaningful questions.
Too many questions.
the first half of the film is basically, if you could imagine, all the characters are stood around on a stage, all stroking their chins, going, isn't life serious and mysterious? And then the second half of the film, they all put their stupid caps on and do daft things that don't line up with anything that their supposed characters would do.
Yeah.
And then we're expected to just accept that, in effect, everything is resolved by driving a ship into another ship and potentially rescuing an android who's been out to get you this whole time.
It felt like you said. It felt like we built this idea of, okay, mankind are going into the stars to search for answers as to who made them, right? So Shaw and Charlie find the cave paintings. There's loads of cave paintings that show alien men, big aliens pointing to the stars. None of that makes sense anyway, but we'll talk about that another time. And they fly out with Prometheus, the ship. Prometheus is a really clever name for the ship because it's the god that gave us fire. It's also the Greek god that started humanity, apparently. That's why it's Prometheus is an overarching name of this expedition. It's actually, in secret, Peter Weyland, a multi-billionaire engineer himself who makes robots and made David. He makes space things. He's basically Elon Musk, but 90. And he wants to go and meet his maker so that he can ask the engineers to give him more life, which is kind of a Blade Runner hangover, where Roy in Blade Runner is killing people to try and find his maker so he can ask his maker to give him more life. So there's a little bit of that in terms of Ridley rehashing ideas. Then on the back of that, you've got David, who is a rehash idea from Alien, and David is an android who is naughty, to say the least, but he's curious, isn't he? Because he's kind of got this thing of, I've been made to serve, but I've also been given the independence to create. But what can I create if I'm made to do nothing but serve? And it's that idea of what it is to be human. All these ideas are thrown into the first 20 minutes of this film, and they are great ideas, but none of them are the central plot. And then, like you said at the end, the central plot is, I think, that the alien engineers that they find point them to the stars. For no reason at all, they go to the stars. The one that they go to is actually a military installation where the engineers were manufacturing a black goo, and the black goo is a biological weapon that they're going to drop on humans and see what it does to them. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah, basically, I think that's what because again, the conversation that they have with an engineer, you can't understand what the engineer is saying, so it's deliberately sort of hidden from you. And but yeah, that's the basic concept, isn't it? They suddenly decide they need to stop this one surviving engineer who's survived what I assume is some sort of civil war that's happened on this planet.
Well, I think the pathogen has got out, hasn't it?
Yeah,
because there's an engineer body that's got holes in it where things have burst out of it, and one of the crew member G or whatever says it's got something burst out of its chest, and you go, oh, hey up, and that's never paid off. But there are loads of dead engineers in the base. And one of them's been decapitated by the door. And when they analyse his head, he's got the bacteria thing in him, hasn't he? He's got the black stuff in his system, and it's killing him. Yeah. And so they made it, but they got infected by it, and then it started killing them, or they started killing each other. And one of them survived.
Yeah, one of them's in this sort of status, and they talk to him. He gets very angry that they're talking at him, and it tears David apart, and then basically makes a run for it to go back to Earth to basically do the Etch-a-Sketch end of the world, as Eddie Izzard would describe it, and start over. Because he realises something. It's implied that he thinks something's gone wrong.
Yeah,
it's not. It's whatever's happening on Earth isn't right, and they need to just start over.
Well, the nerds that I've read about say that the engineers were manufacturing us to be the hosts, which is basically what happens in Alien and in all the other Alien films. Is that whatever happens, the biological weapon or the creatures need hosts.
Yeah,
and the black goo doesn't use engineers as hosts, it just kills them. So they're trying to make a life form where they can genetically alter them with the black goo, which is why when Fifield, the tattoo geologist, who is a complete moron, falls into the black goo, he turns into a zombie, doesn't he?
Yeah, so we have like zombie horror, this film does so many things. And it doesn't do any of them particularly well.
No, but again, there's just snip-tip bits of things happening, which is fine if at the end the message is the black goo gets away and it gets out into space.
Yeah.
And it's gone. It's landed on a planet. Or at the end of the movie, do you know what I mean? Like something needs to happen with the weapon where I'm like, oh, that was the point of the weapon the whole time. The humans went there, but they accidentally let the weapon out, and now the aliens are all over the... You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I felt like... I don't know what I felt like. I felt like if it was at the end, there's an alien laying eggs, I'm like, oh shit, that's how the alien gets created, and that's how the eggs get created, and that's how it gets out. It's humanity's fault, or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's none of that. There's just the thing with... Shaw is the only survivor. She takes David's head on a holiday, and they go on an engineer's ship and they fly off. And they say at the end they're going to fly to the engineer's homeworld for answers. And that's the end. So all the existential shit at the beginning of the movie is not only not really addressed, it's not paid off at all.
Yeah. No, none of it. Yeah.
And they say wait for the sequel, basically, is what the ending is. Wait for the sequel, then you'll find out more. And they said the same thing in the sequel, which we're going to talk about next week. But
yeah,
that's not enough. That doth not a movie make.
No. I think that's the biggest takeaway I got from a lot of like Prometheus apologists when you read about people who really support the film. A lot of them say, oh, it's just the first film, and it's that same old excuse. It's the first film in a franchise of new story that's gonna, it's gonna really round itself out in the next film and the film after that. And you think, I just waited for this film for such a long time, and I was hoping I'd get a film out of it. I didn't want a prologue to a story. It's long enough. How long's this film again?
2 hours 5, I think.
2 hours 5. It's 2 hours 5 of prologue.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And there's this, there is amazing visuals in this movie. Like, the ship looks fantastic. The scope of the ship, how he's built on what he did with Alien 1. And he's kept the vibe very similar with the pods, with the ship. The beginning of the movie, other than the amazing sweeping vistas of Iceland and its prehistoric Earth being populated by a engineer who, again, doesn't really get explained, but an engineer goes to Earth, lands on Earth, is ingesting the black goo. He ingests the black goo, which kills him. He breaks down physically, and his body falls into the Gulf Foss in Iceland. And when we look in the water molecules are binding with his molecules, and they create carbon life, which is essentially us.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that makes sense, kinda. That's how Earth starts, so it isn't actually an alien god that makes us. But then all the bullshit about them pointing to the stars, so presumably they've come back and met us, which is never explained. Presumably the humans who've seen the engineers, because they've painted them on walls, never explained. The engineers have made a church in their base with a giant head of an engineer with loads of weird symbols written on it. In front of the giant head in the church are all the cylinders of black goo, never explained.
No.
And then in the other part of the ship is loads of other ships that have got black goo in cylinders loaded up, ready to launch as a weapon. But again, never really explained. And I'm not bothered that a movie doesn't have to justify all of its bits. But when you, like you said, it's 2 hours 5. Give me something. And at the end,
there's got to be some justification. Like the defense again was, the original Alien film left you with lots of questions. I was like, yes, but those questions were surrounding a central story.
Yeah.
That had a beginning, a middle, and end. Just the basics of storytelling.
Yeah.
This film doesn't do that. This film does a beginning and 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 it just keeps going.
Yeah,
and there's no middle. There's no middle. It's just beginning all the way down. As far as you can see, that it's telling you the start of something. This is the start of something cool. This is going to be the start of the xenomorph. It's the start of this. It's the start of the facehugger. These things that look like worms, but they're also looking a bit like facehuggers. Do you remember that? The facehuggers were cool.
Yeah.
And it's and then.
It's just a mess, isn't it?
There's no because. There's no why. There's no. There's nothing. David's character's creepy. He's interesting in that sense, but he's got very little motivation other than I've been made. So, like you say, how do I create? And
I want to create something for myself. As David's thing, isn't it? And David is named David after the statue of David. Is Michelangelo's work.
Yeah.
There are This is this thing where, and my wife always says this about movies. It always makes me laugh because I don't know. You've got an English degree. My wife's got an English degree. I've got a film degree. That doesn't make us better people, and it doesn't make us more intelligent than the person next to us.
No, frequently in my case, less intelligent.
Same in my case. I'm less intelligent next to you, I find. So I think when a movie tries to pretend it's really clever, it kind of annoys me. Does that make sense? Like,
yes.
When a movie's like, this is a homage to the Statue of David, and haha, this is a homage to Lawrence of Arabia. Have you not seen Lawrence of Arabia? Haha. And this is about Prometheus. He's a god, and he's the god of this, and he came down from Olympus, and blah, blah, blah. You're like, what the fuck are you talking about? I don't care. Give me a film. Is it an alien film or is it not? And I feel like it was trying to be more clever than it was. And I don't blame Ridley for this. I think I just blame writers. I feel like the writers put pen to paper and came up, like you said, with loads of cool concepts. And instead of them being stripped away down to a central beginning, middle and end, they just threw them all in and see what happens. And they said, basically, don't worry what happens, because if we have to answer anything, we'll either do it online with fan theories, or we'll just make a sequel. It's like, that's just not enough.
No, it's not. But I totally agree with you. It's this pseudo-academic thing, and they don't realise what they're doing by referencing Greek classics. Say they're not doing anything smarter than someone saying, "I called my kid Brooklyn because that's where he was conceived."
Ooh, David Beckham.
But seriously, it's exactly the same thing. All you're doing is you're pointing to something that, with a tiny bit of reading, is really obvious, and it doesn't make it smart or clever. It's not shocking, and half the time it's not even going to really hit home in
No.
the first watching of that film. It's just, oh, he's called David. Why? Because he's called David. You know?
Yeah.
And it doesn't impact the story. The fact that you've called your creation David, who from another creation. It's a neat little literally
Easter egg. Yeah.
Easter egg, but it doesn't affect the story in any way.
No, I agree. And I think... yeah, sorry, go on.
And it doesn't affect the story in any way more than, say, I don't know, if you look at Aliens, I know it's a bad call because it wasn't a Ridley film, but Aliens, there's a fight and a contradiction between the Queen and Ripley, both sort of mothering figures at that point, and they're both protecting. In Ripley's case, she's protecting Newt, not her direct offspring, but she's got that maternal instinct towards her, and obviously the Queen's protecting her brood of aliens. That's a more direct link to the story than calling David David.
100%, yeah.
And it's more impactful for me anyway, because that's got emotion to it. It's not pseudo highbrow thinking. It's emotive, visceral storytelling. It's a completely different way of communicating that kind of intelligence, because it's a very in front of you obvious thing in both cases once you understand it, but I think it has more emotional impact even without that thought process.
Yeah,
there's the emotion there, and the whole David because David doesn't.
No, I agree. There are things I do like about this movie. Again, I like the scene with the baby squid. I think that was interesting. Yeah. Again, doesn't really go anywhere, but I liked the horror aspect of it. I think the cinematography is outstanding when they go into these halls, and it's got the Geiger feel to it.
Yes.
There are some really cool science fiction moments, like the little tracking dots which Fifield throws up into the air and they go down the tunnels, and they look great. The holograms of the engineers look cool. David himself, Fassbender, is unbelievably good in this movie. And I think he is the most outstanding thing in the film. He also does this amazing impersonation of Peter O'Toole in Lawrence of Arabia, which he references as his favourite film. Yeah. And I think there are several lines, if you're a big fan of that movie like me, he literally quotes the film several times, and someone goes, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Oh, it's from some movie that I like." And you're like, he's literally channeling his inner Peter O'Toole. So if Fassbender did go and sit and watch Peter O'Toole for hours on end to pick the voice up and everything, I like it. Yeah. You know what? Hats off. I think it adds something cool to a character where you go, he's a robot, but he's also based his whole image, including his blonde highlights, on Peter O'Toole in Lawrence of Arabia, which is a cool reference. Again, it doesn't need to be there because it's not clever in any way. It's just cool. No. I want to play you something. It's only a minute. This was one of the bits of material on YouTube that were aired in the run-up to the release of Prometheus. This is a manufactured fake TED Talk set in March 2023, which I found really strange because we're currently in February of 2023. And it's Guy Pearce as a younger Peter Wayland doing a TED Talk about how he's going to change the world. Here's a clip.
20th century. The automobile, television, nuclear weapons, spacecraft, internet. 21st century. Biotech, nanotech, fusion and fission and M theory. And that was just the first decade. We are now 3 months into the year of our Lord, 2023. At this moment in our civilization, we are on the verge of terraforming planets undiscovered just a decade ago. We have identified the genetic chain of events behind 98% of cancers. A chain we have broken, effectively curing them. We can create cybernetic individuals who, in just a few short years, will be completely indistinguishable from us. Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We are the gods now.
I thought that was really good. The video is on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing. If I'm honest, this TED Talk, which was completely set up, manufactured with CGI and everything, it's got Guy Pearce looking suave as shit. That should have been the opening of the film. If this was the opening of the movie makes more sense. And like you said earlier, good writing is putting in things that expand the plot, that don't need... You know, if you're struggling with the visual way of showing someone something, which again it's bad filmmaking, but fair play if you're going to do it. If you're going to tell people the plot, do it in a clever way. So having Wayland at a TED Talk talking about this mission with Prometheus, about discovering aliens and about being gods, then cut to the mission actually happening, makes sense. It's clever writing, and then it sets up the idea of why Wayland wants to go on the trip and why he shows up in the third act. The fact that Wayland shows up in the third act doesn't make any sense in the movie. It just feels completely out of left field.
Yeah.
There's also deleted scenes in the film, which again, you can watch them all on YouTube, which give you more context into each character. They add more to relationships. You have some extra clips of David. You have a clip of Fifield when he gets mutated. They've done a different version of him, which is released as a deleted scene. It's an alternative scene. But instead of him being zombie Fifield with a big head and big teeth, he looks like a xenomorph. He's got xenomorph arms, he's got a tail, and his head is slightly elongated, but he's got his tattoos still, and he's got hair, but his head's sort of changed shape to look more like an alien. And when you watch that clip, again, it's on YouTube, you go, oh shit, the black goo makes aliens. It literally mutates things, so maybe that's how they happened. It's not big or clever, but it's enough where you go... Oh, he got the black goo in him, and then he turns into a xenomorph, or to some iteration, that might be how they came about.
Yeah,
it's clever, and it makes you curious to go, oh, that's maybe what it is then. But they cut it, and they had him a zombie instead, and I'm going, why the fuck is he a zombie? That makes no sense. Do the xenomorph. He turns half xenomorph. That makes sense. So I guarantee, go and watch it. It does make sense. But like you said, it felt like we give it more credit than it deserves. Ultimately, we gave it more credit than it deserves. It's not clever. It has clever words in it, and it has people stood on stage having existential moments with each other, but that's it. It doesn't really go anywhere, and it isn't really that clever. It looks beautiful, but it's not as good as Alien. And I'd say it's probably not even as good as Alien Resurrection.
No, it probably isn't. I tell you what, Jake, I also feel like I want plaudits for being clever. So what I'm going to do when I edit this podcast, I'm just going to edit it down to all the vowel noises we've made.
Yeah, I think we should also go, if we're creating a podcast, who created our podcast? Who created podcasts? Did Apple create podcasts? And just have an existential crisis and then make a clever bit of music on it. I think that'll be fine.
Yeah, I think
because like you said,
probably...
This movie is just people stood around asking each other questions and nobody gets an answer, including the audience.
Exactly. I think there's more character development for the spaceships in this film than there is actual character development for the characters.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Which makes sense that there's so many deleted scenes, because it seems like all the bits with characters in got deleted.
Yeah, in favour of just stupid stuff. There's so many things that don't make sense in this movie. Again, there's loads of fan theories which I really love, and I do love reading them. I read a really good one. It's backed up by an interview with Ridley Scott, where Ridley states, someone says, are there going to be any androids in your Prometheus prequel? And he says, there might be 2. And they all start giggling. And somebody has said the second android in Prometheus is Vickers, which I think me and you've talked about already before we started recording. This concept, there's a whole thing, you can go online and read about it. I ain't got time to talk about it on here, but that Charlize Theron's Vickers was an android created before David. David got created second, and he supplanted her as Wayland's favourite, which is why she's got hardly any emotion. She never bleeds in the movie. When she pushes David into a door, she does it with such force, and she holds him there, which apparently, a human couldn't do because he's super strong. And there were loads of things where you're like, okay, maybe, I don't know. And then someone's like, she's got a med pod, but when Shaw goes in the med pod, it's calibrated to men, not women, which means it was made for Wayland, not for her. And it's like, it's tenuous at best, but some people on the internet have given it loads of kudos and said, yes, she is an android and blah, blah, blah. And that, again, goes back to Deckard in Blade Runner and kind of annoys me because, again, Blade Runner is a clever movie that asks questions and answers them. What is it to be human? What is it to be a robot? That's what Blade Runner's about. And at the end, it's about life. It's about wanting to live and having the right to live.
Yeah. And
none of that there's nothing like that cleverness in Prometheus, unfortunately. It doesn't have any of that. And like I said to you earlier, at the end, it's people running away in bad directions. Everyone gets crushed. Idris Elba and his two co-pilots fly the ship into an alien ship, despite the fact that the other two could have probably got off. They choose to stay. We're given characters who have very little development, like the Scottish doctor. We don't know what her name is. She has about 4 lines with her thick Scottish accent. I think she gets killed by an engineer, but I'm not sure. And that's it. You don't really find out anything about her. There are at least 10 crew members in the movie that I don't remember at all.
Yeah.
Fifield and Milburn are the 2 scientists who go into the headroom with the others and they get lost, despite the fact that Fifield bought the tracking equipment. None of it makes any sense.
No, it doesn't. It's a, oh gosh, this is going to sound horrible, but it's a passionless passion project.
Yeah.
And I think that's its biggest downfall. It's obvious when you watch it that Ridley wanted to make this film. And and it's equally obvious that there was very few people sat around him telling him no.
I think you're right.
For all of his ideas. Everyone's like, yeah, that's great, because it's Ridley Scott. I mean, you're not going to say no to Ridley Scott.
Yeah,
but
I agree. I think
maybe someone should have. Just once or twice.
Oh, I love it. And what was funny, and again, we'll talk about this next week, is that he said it was a project, it's a prequel, it is connected to the Alien universe despite saying it wasn't, and he says there's going to be sequels, they're going to come, they're coming out, don't worry about them, but they are going to give you more context and they're going to answer a lot of the questions. And Ridley kept saying this, and we all got told that it was going to be called something different, it was going to be about a different group of people picking up where Prometheus left off, it was going to explain Shaw and David's journey. And in the end, I think it was around the writer's strike, I can't remember for sure, the movie got completely twisted, changed, rechanged, changed again, then changed, then rechanged, then dropped, then retaken on, then dropped again, then retaken by Ridley. And it ended up becoming Alien Covenant, which is our next movie we're going to be reviewing. Yeah. And Alien Covenant is or may not be a sequel to Prometheus, but may not be, but also may be a prequel to Alien 1, but might not be because there might be another one. That is it, right? Have I explained that right?
Yeah, that's spot on. In fact, we probably don't need to do the next episode now. You've covered everything.
No. And that is, like you said before, it's very clear that nobody had any idea where this movie was going. No one had any idea if it was going to work. No one had any idea if a franchise could work. They just took the names of the ideas of Alien, they took the name Ridley, they put a script to it, they made a fucking awesome trailer, and then they sold it to the world. And like you said, it was just a transaction.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to end this episode.
I do too. I've got the receipt for this transaction.
Go on.
We normally do 5 interesting facts. I can't think of many, but this is one.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd tell you this. Apparently, according to Ridley Scott, the decision to film in 3D added $10 million to the film's budget.
I didn't even know it was shot in 3D. I don't think I saw it in 3D.
No, I don't think I've ever seen it in 3D. So that's $10 million that effectively went up in smoke because 3D tellies are no longer a thing.
No, yeah, I didn't. It was a gimmick, wasn't it? Like we knew it was.
So you're really going to have to try hard to watch this in 3D. And I can't think of anything that 3D would have added to this film.
No, I agree.
But yeah, so that's 10 million of our dollars that went into this when we paid to watch it, into making it 3D. Well done, Ridley.
Yeah, I was saying to you before, and it was one of those things where when I came out the cinema watching this with my best friend the first time we went to see it, I think we had a couple of pints before we went to see it. We went into the cinema. We were really stoked, really excited for it because it was such a, like you say, a big anticipated summer blockbuster. And I remember walking down the stairs thinking it was over and then just seeing that engineer's chest explode and the xenomorph climb out. And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. And I don't think I've felt like that many times in movies where I've been like, oh, they couldn't even figure that out. So they just threw that in at the end just to make sure you know it's there. And it's not really earned or clever because I don't even want to talk about it. But yeah,
the only modern equivalent I can think of would be the girl power moment at the end of the Endgame.
Yeah, that didn't get well received, did it?
No, and it's that kind of unearned. Look what we did. We did this. Look at that. And when the film spends its last final moments going, look what we did. Are we good? And you go, no, you're not good. You're not good at all.
No.
Terrible, in fact. So, yeah, it's an unearned ending to a film that didn't do too much to try and earn that ending. And we've done it now, though. We're over the... We're on the last sort of stretch of this Alien franchise because we're
until
definitely
Ridley
not doing
decides to
Alien
reboot it again.
Oh God, no! Don't encourage him. Shh! Don't tell him. He probably doesn't think people are watching these anymore.
It's mad as well, though, isn't it, James? Because you think, well, it's 2023 now, so surely they've wrapped up all those questions in all the sequels they've made. You're like, no, they've made one sequel to it, which I think was made 5 years later, and that doesn't really connect to this movie at all. And we're going to talk about that next week.
Yeah.
But, yeah, oh, God, I just don't understand it. I thought, with the benefit of sort of 10 or 12 years since it came out, that I might feel different about it, or I might have picked up on something that I hadn't seen before, or I might just be a bit of a Philistine. And I was like, no. All of those things I feel the same way. And like you said, it's people getting on the internet defending it and saying, this is the reason this happened. It's like, well, that's not clear. That's just your opinion. It's open to interpretation. And fine, some literature is great because it's open to interpretation to the point where you can get so much from it. I don't think Prometheus can be given the accolade that it's that clever, that it's there for you to dissect. I don't think it is, unfortunately. That's my opinion. I don't think there's enough there for you to go, it was deliberately clever and ambiguous. I think it was just lazy.
Yeah, I think you're right. We didn't get the film that we were hyped up for.
No, and it's almost not even related to the franchise until in the sequel it immediately becomes an Alien film.
yeah. Just all of a sudden it's a hard cut to being an Alien film.
Yeah, very odd, very strange. But yeah, thanks for that, James. I have enjoyed doing this one. We will get some shit merch for next week, and I'll make sure the 5 facts is properly in. And after that, we'll announce, once we've done Covenant, we'll announce our next group of films, which will be more exciting than Prometheus, for sure.
Absolutely.
Right. Thanks, James. Cheers,
Thanks,
everybody.
Jake.
Take care, people. Bye.
Bye.